Okay, hi everyone. So we're going to get started. I'm Victoria Rutherford from Adelaide Capital, and today I have with me Silas Garrison, the CEO of HS GovTech. So those of you that aren't familiar with HS GovTech, they're one of the leading providers of data management solutions, a SaaS technology application player to basically across North America. Silas, thanks for joining me today.
Victoria, thank you for having me.
It's been a minute since we've got on here and given an update. And from what I've seen, you guys have been extremely busy.
Very busy, as always, but it keeps on getting busier, it seems.
Yeah, well, that's what we like to see. So I have a bunch of questions for you, but before we jump into them, if you wouldn't mind just maybe giving, a brief update of your presentation, just for those of you who aren't as familiar with the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're HS GovTech, so I know that a lot of folks in the audience, you've heard the story and you're very familiar with us. So I'll keep this, brief and top level and leave plenty of time for Q&A. But for those who are not familiar, those who are newer to the story, HS GovTech Solutions, we focus, as Victoria said, we focus on government, but very specifically kind of two niches within government, right? We focus on state and local government, and really local government is anything state or provincial downward. And even more specifically within the local government spectrum is we focus on areas of health and safety. So regulatory agencies that really their workflows are complicated. They track a lot of very urgent and meaningful things that impact the lives of millions, tens of millions of citizens every single day. But if you're going to break it down, what our core kind of customer base is focused on is collecting an application from a citizen, private business owner, processing that application, then turning around, issuing a permit or an invoice. A permit or a license, and then issuing, an invoice, usually on a recurring basis every year for that permit, and then conducting regulatory and safety inspections every single, quarter, bi-weekly or bi-monthly, it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction and use case to use case. But bottom line is, that's it in a nutshell. You issue a permit, conduct an inspection, and there's some sort of financial or billing component. All of that information flows through our platform, and we're fully cloud-based, fully enterprise. And the one thing about government is that no two agencies are really created exactly alike. And it's one of the biggest selling points of our platform is not just the power behind it, but the flexibility within each individualized implementation. To look at us as a whole, we have over 800 individualized government agencies, departments ranging from small rural counties all the way up to statewide implementations, but over 800 individualized government departments and growing that utilize our cloud platforms to run every facet of essentially their day-to-day duties. We are sitting at, financially speaking, 6 million in ARR, 6 million in annual recurring revenue, and our customer retention rate is a near perfect track record, quite frankly. Very few in terms of churn, and that really speaks to both our stickiness as a provider, but also the government market in large is a very reliable, very sticky customer base. Right now, we're really focusing on growing, obviously, but getting to some high water marks that are very common for SaaS companies. 10 million in ARR, which is a number that those who are familiar with the story we've been talking about for a while, and I'll get into, I think, in the Q&A a little bit. But right now we're predicting that's achievable sometime within the year 2023. My background, for those who are new to the story, I've been in GovTech for, my entire career. I started at a very young age. I'm, tech first as a leader in terms of I built a large portion of our software platforms and, from startup to basically where we are today and well into the future, very focused on being at the leading edge of everything that is really the GovTech industry. One slide that I will turn to that, I mentioned that we have 800 plus agencies and departments utilizing our platform, but the one slide that I will kind of round out the overview of HS GovTech is this one, which is our market coverage. When I say market coverage, this is our geographic penetration. When you look at the GovTech space, the landscape of government and how they purchase software, or really purchase anything, but especially software, they are a trusted buyer. These dark blue states that you see highlighted are where we have customer penetration, anywhere from just one singular county all the way up to an entire statewide contract, regardless of the penetration in those states. Where you see dark blue, it's virtually a guarantee that we are going to get more adoption. government not only is a trusted, but they're also a follow-on buyer. They like to see where it's been working in their specific region, their geographic, laws, rules, and regulations, workflows. And so, we've proven this time and time again in many, many states and provinces, but where you see this dark blue, that's just a kind of a guarantee that we're going to continue to expand. And as we land more states, which we just recently did, the state of Kentucky, which we did not have before, we're going to continue to build upon that momentum and generate additional revenue. Victoria, I'm going to kind of cut it there. Obviously, there's a lot more that we can cover, but for time's sake, and also for, I think that's a good kind of abbreviated version of the story at large.
Yeah, no, that's great. So maybe we can just start off by, you mentioned the state of Kentucky. So obviously, huge announcement out of you guys, largest contract that you guys have announced to date, coming over just a little bit over $9 million. Congratulations on that. And so, this was a big contract. How long was this sitting in your pipeline, and what was the process you had, to go through to get this over the line? And maybe you can just tell us a little bit more about this contract in general.
Yeah, it is a very exciting event for us. And we believe it's a very exciting event for the state of Kentucky. Each one of these agencies that we sign on, regardless of size, they're our partners. And we join in on this as a partnership. And, the state of Kentucky is very similar to a lot of other sales wins that we've had as of recent. This was actually, a lot of people don't know this, but, that was a deal that was largely known to the market in terms of the customer market that we serve, that they were planning to move forward in 2019-20. They were planning on likely issuing an RFP because they were replacing their incumbent system. This was not like a closely guarded secret. They were getting ready to move on and modernize. And when the pandemic hit, they kind of just shelved it for a little bit. And each year, 2021, they said, yeah, we just need a little bit more time. And so this spring, in terms of 2022, when you ask how long was it sitting in our sales pipeline, when we present numbers about our sales pipeline, the size of it, the deals, we did not mention it in our actual quoted sales pipeline until 2022, when it became real that they were actually going to have the bandwidth to move forward with this RFP. But they issued it in the first couple of months, right around February time. They issued an RFP. There were several, a good many actually, bidders, several finalists that we went head to head with in terms of final demonstrations. And we ended up winning, as is obvious, right? But that's a contract that we largely put together and closed in just a couple of short months once they decided that we were the chosen winner. That was back in September, and basically since then we've been going through the preliminary stages of kicking off that implementation, which I'm very pleased to say is going to go extremely well by both accounts. Again, going back to that partnership mentality, we're starting off on a very strong foot.
So obviously you mentioned winning the contract, obviously, but in terms of competition, who were you guys up against? Was it, Tyler and Excella, kind of the regular players, or who would have all had a look at this deal that you guys were competing against?
All of these bids are public, right? They are public bids that are solicited against any company that wants to take a shot at it. The bidder list was not widely disseminated or made public, so I cannot comment in terms of specific names, though I do believe our typical competitors that we see out there, Excella, along with a few other maybe large consulting firms, definitely took a bid at this, but they clearly found that our solution was a perfect fit for them, as it's becoming a recurring theme.
And then I guess, can you just speak a little bit more about the implementation process and, what all that entails from, kind of a moving forward from this point timeline perspective? And then also, you guys, are a growing company. This is a really big contract. So in terms of capacity, how much of your capacity is going to be tied up in implementing this deal?
Yeah, I'll start with the latter and then work backwards in terms of the implementation. So in terms of staffing, one of the things that we've talked about for a while now, you've seen our headcount grow. It's not a mystery that we've increased cost, but a lot of that personnel was directly dedicated to ensuring that they were well-trained and seasoned as we get these larger implementations, which we knew were coming our way. And so a couple of them are rolling off already big implementations. So it's not like we have to go hire a bunch of new heads to suffice this contract. They're coming off ones that they've already successfully implemented. Now they get to roll into a new implementation. So there's not a huge headcount increase that we have to do here just to meet the needs of Kentucky. And as far as the implementation go, again, 800 plus agencies utilizing us, having large implementations in our pocketbook that we've successfully rolled out means that we're able to kind of take a templatized approach. We're able to sit down and say, okay, here's how we've done it for other agencies, a couple of dozen different ways. Here's what we best recommend for, your permitting process. Okay, take a look at that, work with it in real time, and then give us feedback as to like where you want to tweak it for your local regulatory codes. So we're taking kind of that real time, very agile approach to it, which is the most successful way really to do software implementation.
And then, in terms of the visibility that you have, moving forward here, are there other large contracts like this that you guys see on the horizon?
Absolutely. This market is opening up more and more month after month. And obviously, it's really not even a mystery. I don't even have to bang our own drums, getting this deal with Kentucky. We are looked at as the leader in this space, the environmental health space. And that success is bleeding into other market segments, as we saw when we closed our first fire deal last year. And other areas that we've talked about along the way, not to mention agriculture, which has always been a core component of our centralized focus. We're going to see continued growth in that space as well. So yeah, there's more along the lines of future large contracts. That's all the details I'll share in specificity today.
You mentioned, you mentioned other verticals. And so that kind of brings up a good point is, you've talked a little bit about fire and agriculture, and we've talked about code enforcement in the past. But it seems like, environmental health just has so much more room, and there's all these contracts that are still getting done, which is kind of your bread and butter. And so just in terms of, like your priorities moving forward, where do some of these other verticals sit on your priority list, versus environmental health?
So our first priority is and remains those that are close to home. Environmental health is tops, right? That is the market that we truly serve and have a deep, deep passion for. That along with agriculture, which is very, very closely related. Verticals beyond that, we are growing in and we see opportunities, and where the opportunity is a good fit, we are going to go after that. But right now, there is just so much opportunity within the environmental health segment, a kind of underserved market that keeps growing in opportunity. We're going to go where the iron is hot, and that's where our passion is, and that's where we have a lot of success stories, and we're going to just keep growing after that until such a time that these other verticals really start to blossom on their own, which is a foregone conclusion in our mind. But for now, its priority is and agriculture.
And then, we've really started to see a lot of these contract wins that you guys have been announcing over the last few years roll through into your numbers. And we saw, really good growth in revenues in Q1, and that, followed into Q2. And now we have this announcement of Kentucky, and your ARR is up to 6 million. So I guess the next thing, people are looking for in terms of, what level of revenue, or is it a certain time period when you can start to see yourselves cash flow positive?
Yeah, we've been talking about, that time frame under which we predict will be, cash flow positive, and, haven't moved off the needle of, middle of next year. We predict that we'll be in and around cash flow break even, if not have actually met that target. And it's a metric of two revenue buckets. A lot of people love to pay attention because it's what we talk about the most, this ARR subscription revenue, which we're at, just over 6 million in ARR as we sit as at the end of Q3. But really, we have a secondary line of revenue, which is not insignificant, which is our professional services, which also makes up a good portion of our cost structure. And so when you look at that together, 6 million in ARR, we're kind of at an annualized 12-month run rate that, about 3 million in professional services. We kind of predict minimum that we've been doing on it, go forward run rate. That puts us at, 9 million kind of all in, projected baked revenue. And break even is, somewhere in that 11-12 mark. So obviously all of it is dependent upon closing out a lot of these other big sales that we are very well intimately familiar with, and we know are likely coming our way. And so that's kind of where we sit today.
And then I guess, kind of following on that, in your presentation, you mentioned that 10 million in ARR target over the next 12 to 18 months. So maybe what's the significance of hitting, 10 million in ARR within your industry?
Well, everybody you kind of go to, from private equity firms to just kind of pundits and beyond, 10 is looked at as just a somewhat arbitrary but very well proven benchmark of where companies start to really hit a scaling stride. And I can tell you, having gone from just a couple of $1 million in revenue to now over six and ARR today, when I took over, we've gone through so many scaling verticals, not just going from a headcount of 18 to 90 people, but also as you continue to scale, you refine processes, you figure out the kind of do's and don'ts, and no formulaic solution, no business process book's going to tell you exactly how it's going to work for your company and your industry. And so when you hit that kind of 10 threshold, it's when the external world starts to really recognize, without really any intimacy, they just know that you've hit sort of a plateau of maturation. And so that's one of the reasons why we talk about it so much.
Okay, so then that is actually a good segue into another question here. So, you hit 10 million and the external world starts to recognize you. So, you guys are getting pretty substantial in terms of your scale and your size now, and you guys are winning, not just the state of Kentucky, but you guys are winning, a lot of the bid rounds that you guys are going into against your competition. So, at what point do you think you guys really start to show up on their radars in terms of, potential M&A or anything like that?
It's a good question. And not being privy to the boardrooms of those other companies, I can't actually answer. I can only surmise that our names are being mentioned. And I say that because, we're starting to, this $9.4 million contract with the state of Kentucky, it is sizable on a lot of fronts, but it's not common to see enterprise SaaS deals of that size, especially within local government, state governments. And so knowing that we have competitors that operate in this space and they are M&A heavy, it's only a foregone conclusion. But I will not put a crystal ball before it, but I do believe that, the M&A door is likely one that could get knocked on at some point in time, and we will deal with it as such when and if that happens.
Okay, I'm going to jump to an audience question. And I just want to remind the audience that if you do have any questions, you could type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And so, just jumping back to some of the verticals that you mentioned, and I think you have a slide on this. I'm not sure if you want to pull it up maybe, but please compare the total addressable market of kind of health and safety versus agriculture and fire.
Yeah, so when you look at addressable market sizes, we look at it in total user counts, right? How many users can we onboard in a given market segment? Within environmental health specifically, we estimate that market to be somewhere between 85 and 100,000 users, which translates into about 120 million in ARR or more. Agriculture, which is really closely combined with that, would add about another 30 to 40 million in ARR, kind of for a total addressable market size, right in that 180 to $200 million mark. And then you look at other areas like fire, which has, 1 million plus people that works in that industry. That's $1 billion, addressable market size, not imagining that we'll take on 90% of it, but even smaller percentages start to really add up. So, fire for us is a multi-billion-dollar market segment that we are making inroads into. But the couple $100 million plus market segment, we are seriously making a dent in. And so we're going to stick close to that and make deep penetration, and as we simultaneously work on these other market segments.
And then another question that came in. So you were competing with some large consulting firms for the Kentucky RFP. Do you expect to do deals with consulting firms who could bring you new opportunities?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There are opportunities out there where a lot of these firms work as a reseller and also a co-implementer or a sole implementer. As the deal size grows, that opportunity does as well. We have worked with resellers in the past, kind of as a pass-through vehicle to bypass a little bit of procurement red tape. And so we do see it as an avenue in the future, though not a primary driver in the near term.
So those are all of the audience questions so far. So if anyone else has a question, you can type it in the Q&A box. Oh, one just came in. So in terms of reaching 10 million in revenue, it would be good to get some color as to whether we should expect this to be achieved through larger one-off deals similar to Kentucky or through multiple county level deals.
Kentucky alone represented 1 million in ARR. That's very outsized. So yes, you're going to have the outsized opportunities that ratchet the revenue growth. And the kind of equal offset to that is those smaller county deals, mid-size and above. Our true average contract size is about $30,000 a year. But then you have the ones that are in the very high outlier. And so the real true answer is it's probably going to be about 50% large, 50% aggregate of the smallers.
And then I guess, moving forward throughout the year, Silas, what are some things we should be watching for in terms of catalysts? What are you excited about? What are you worried about? All of those things.
All of those things. Well, to start with the worry and then move into the other, what am I worried about? Obviously what everybody's worried about. These economic times, the macro conditions, there's really not a lot of predictability with war drums and all of that stuff. And so I worry just like everybody else, just what is this world coming to, very bluntly. For us in particular, there's really not a lot of worry. And the reason is because we see the landscape has drastically shifted to modernization and funds to back up that modernization all across the local governmental spectrum. There is just no slowing down that train. It is happening. And we have kind of the preeminent platform for these regulatory agencies that is looked at as the gold standard. Talked to a number of our customers, and I will tell you, they love our platform, and it's the most gratifying, humbling thing. So when you look at what am I excited about, I am excited to continue to make inroads and benefit the whole of local government from coast to coast all across the US and Canada, because we are actively doing that, and we are transforming an industry that is begging for transformation, modern solutions that fit this day and age, that are flexible and will grow with them in the future. So that's what I'm excited about. As far as catalysts grow, it's going to continue to be sales wins, sales wins, sales wins. Watch our sales growth because we are doing it. Watch how we're controlling costs and scaling. Scaling is the hardest thing any company can ever go through. And we've hit a maturation in our growth cycle that's going to continue. And we've also hit a stasis in kind of our scaling cycle, meaning that we can implement seamlessly without a lot of arduous red tape and pain points. That trial and error that you go through when you're a startup no longer is really a thing for us. And so, watch how our costs will be stagnant and only grow incrementally as our revenue continues to rise significantly. So, that's another thing in terms of catalysts. And one of the things I'll just end with is HS Pay. Because I know a lot of people probably are really curious, like, hey, you don't talk about HS Pay a lot for those who are familiar with the story. And what I can tell you is I'm very excited about HS Pay. 2023 is looking like it's going to be the big year that it becomes not just cemented. We've implemented it. We've seen a lot of transactions flow through, but the volume and the size of customer who's been implementing it over the course of the year, the dollar volume is not quite there to where we've been reporting public numbers. But 2023, we have a lot of deals shaping up, both from contracts won this year and closed, and a lot of in our sales pipeline that HS Pay should become something pretty meaningful over the course of 2023.
Okay, so I think 6 new questions have just come in. So
yeah, I just got to keep talking. They're just going to keep asking. Okay.
So maybe what's your M&A perspective from your standpoint in terms of, are the client lists that you can acquire or new technology that would make sense for you guys to bring in-house, or how are you guys looking at that? At
this time, capital is better spent on tended to the storehouse and implementing our existing customer sales pipeline. M&A outbound from us to acquire anything, it's a very short list. We do keep a list of possibilities, but there's nothing actionable on the near term. And then any visibility into the size of your current pipeline that you guys are bidding on actively? Kentucky, the last time, so I'll say this because we announced it sometime, I think this summer's the last time we mentioned it in a public announcement. 25 million US was the sales pipeline. And even post Kentucky, I can tell you that it's accelerated above that. The reason that we don't call attention to a specific number these days is because it grows every single week, every single month, and to keep updating it becomes a bit of a distraction, honestly, for the shareholder market. And so what we would rather just focus on is our sales wins and how we're growing, and the size of the sales pipeline itself becomes a bit of a non sequitur. How many people are on your business development team? How does it operate, and what's the length of your sales cycle? So our sales cycle, it is government. So, it runs a large gamut. We have some contracts that can close in as little as 60 days from initial interaction and demo all the way to contract closings. If it goes into, it's a larger size deal and it goes into an RFP, a bid situation, that can run all the way up to 9 months and perhaps even a year. And as we saw with COVID, there was unique situations like Kentucky that was a go and then a pause and then a go and then a pause. And so our true average is right in that 6 to 9 month total full sales cycle. As for our sales department, we've got 8 individuals that work full time, drumming up deals and doing business activity. If you look at our social media, you can see some of the wonderful faces that serve this customer market. And not only is it about generating sales, but it's building relationships. It's the most vital thing that you can do in this space. And that doesn't take an army, right? It takes a very sophisticated, experienced, and specific skill set, which is why we keep our sales team very, I won't say lean and mean, but it's not what a lot of people look at when they look at other SaaS companies in different verticals, non-government, and they're like 300-400 people. That just doesn't work the same in government.
Can you give some qualitative color on how your software needs to be tailored for each vertical? And are there any difficulties in penetrating further into newer verticals, or has most of the heavy lifting in terms of the tailoring of your software and implementation training already been done?
The heavy lifting has been done, but there's more innovation, more things. Without just opening up the proverbial kimono and showing the full product roadmap, which we keep some of that behind closed doors for obvious reasons, competitive reasons. There's a lot of other innovative things that we plan to do to shorten the implementation cycle, increase the velocity of onboarding new customers, and the ability to sell additional verticals. But that notwithstanding, the majority of it is already done. The core platform is a platform. It's not just a product, individualized product. It's a suite of products that all are buttoned and thoroughly integrate well together, which is one of our key selling points. So again, heavy lifting is done. The ability to go into additional market verticals exists today, but there's always more things in our product pipeline that we're continuing to innovate upon.
And then your team has been attending a lot of conferences. Do you expect that to continue? And what's the primary goal of attending these conferences?
Going back to what I just said a minute ago, it is building relationships. It is being out there in front of these folks that we serve day in and day out, these government operations, these government departments, environmental, health, agriculture, et cetera. Showing your face is a large part of beginning it, because when they see our solutions, they then want to know the face behind it. And so being in these these industry conferences is very meaningful to our customer base. It's meaningful for us. Again, it has the ability to hear about new needs or opportunities potentially, and even could feed into our product pipeline. So it's a very self-feeding mechanism that benefits our customers, it benefits us and beyond.
Okay. And then another question going back to just your sales force. So you said you have 8 currently. How does this compare to a year ago?
Only grown by about 2 individuals from a year ago. We've kept it pretty tight.
Do you foresee agencies making online payment the only option for customers, in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, there is a day and age where that paradigm will shift. It's local government. They have to serve citizens, which serving citizens means that often by law, but definitely from just a political standpoint, you have to at least afford the opportunity for someone to send in a paper check. Now, that is not a forever de facto stance, but for the foreseeable future, I do not see them passing a red law that says you must pay online, though that day and age is going to come.
Okay. Are there any plans to uplist in the foreseeable future?
For us, it's all about time, cost, and opportunity, and really what is the benefit to shareholders. We will enact, and we always keep our eye out and think about such things, and it's a point of conversation. But it is not something that in the immediate, if there is a true opportunity that it's going to increase shareholder value, exposure, it's accretive from a cost and time perspective of us also operating the company, that is something that we definitely would consider. But at this time, those check marks have not been fully ticked off.
Any updates on the take up of GovCall? What is the main draw to move to GovCall rather than one of the many existing video conferencing providers out there? Is it convenience of integration with the broader HS product suite?
Yep. It goes back to having a singular platform, having a product suite fully integrated. Our GovCall platform, makes it so easy and seamless to be able to, conduct your virtual inspection, regulatory speaking, also interact with the records, records being, the kind of digital representation of that kind of user profile or that business, that permit, et cetera. Being able to make, legal citations as you are conducting that inspection, much like you would do if you had a clipboard and paper or an iPad, you're in the field in person, you'd be able to notate things as you go. This is allowing you to do the same thing. So that seamless integration is really irreplaceable. And the disparate systems, competing systems, Zooms and the like, really are honestly not user-friendly, I should say, as GovCall is for the governmental market, the way that they have to utilize it, the true web-based nature, not just a downloadable extension or desktop app. So many reasons why it is superior for the use case at which we've deployed it. The adoption rate, the uptake, that's one of those things coming out of the pandemic that we've started to see the demand continue to increase and rise. But a lot of our customer base, if you really look at our sales growth over the past couple of years, 18 months in particular, we've had a lot of sales growth from a lot of customers, and they have to go live with their data, their data management platform first, and then roll into these other ancillary things like HSPay and GovCall. And so the GovCall adoption rate has been moderate from my perspective, but we do anticipate that really heavily upticking as we head into 2023.
Okay, and then I have another question asking about customer acquisition costs. And I don't know if you have those numbers offhand, but more just trying to really understand the range of, the payback period between bringing on maybe a smaller client like a county versus bringing on the state of Kentucky, and like what the range of your payback would be.
Well, we charge professional services fees, one-time fees up front, and those are usually commensurate to payback, so to speak. There's really two main costs in adopting a customer, right? It's the sales cost that went into it, the salaries and the commission, and that's spread across every single sale, right? Not just one. And then it's the implementation cost, but that's all offset largely by professional services fees that we charge to implement the software. And so I don't have an exact answer for whoever asked that question. In terms of it does vary on the size of the deal, but largely within the first year, I would say offset.
Okay. And then can HSPay scan a physical check for deposit versus requiring it to be physically deposited?
Good question. We're working on such a situation right now with some of our customers, but that's about all I can comment on that right now.
And then you mentioned as far as M&A, there wasn't many potential targets that would be worthwhile. Does that mean that the competitive landscape isn't that fragmented? And it's really just some of the main players that you've mentioned repeatedly, which would be Tyler and Excella.
The competitive landscape is very consolidated. There is a surge of kind of groundswell, I believe, of tech startups that may be kind of taking an interest. Though if you contrast that with any other industry, it's single-digit percentages of kind of VC capital that flows into that. That being said, there are a few out there, but to the person who asked this question, it is consolidated. Yes, and it's largely consolidated by just a few players.
And then, because you guys have, the preeminent product suite, do you think it's possible that you guys would be able to implement some price increases?
We are already at a very aggressive pricing scale. So, at this time, we always are sensitive to the market, not just in tolerance and for what we can increase, but, what is also available and palatable. A lot of these, implementations we go into, they get federally funded. And so those are very fixed grant dollars. So at this time, it's something that we always monitor, but it's not a yes or a no. It is just something that we continually monitor.
Okay. And then do you find that being a publicly listed company and the strength of your balance sheet are a factor with your government sales efforts? Do they look for those things?
Yeah, it's a factor, but it's one of those things that isn't largely, paid attention to one way or the other.
Okay. So unless anyone has any additional questions, that was our rapid fire session with Silas has now come to an end. But no, Silas, anything that you want to leave people with, we do appreciate your time today. And thank you for, answering all of those questions for us. We definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Victoria and Adelaide in general, I really appreciate you putting this together and getting the word out. Thank you all. I love answering questions, honestly. And so this was a very fun webinar for me. And, I appreciate those who are already investors and, the investment that you've taken into HS GovTech, I take very seriously and personally. And for those who are prospective, it's a really great time. I'm so excited for the fact that this governmental market keeps expanding, keeps growing. The opportunity is so ripe. And every day that passes, not only do we get stronger at what we do, every single customer or potential customer is lining up either dollars and cents or is getting very frustrated with what they're existing on. So the opportunity is so ripe and continues to grow. So yeah, thank you all for joining on and asking the questions, and listen to me share HS GovTech.
Thanks so much, Silas. And if anyone does walk away and think of any further questions that they have, you can always message or email me at victoria@adcap.ca, and I can make sure that your questions get answered. Thanks again, everyone. And Silas, as always, thanks for jumping on with me today.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, bye, everyone.